different barriers. A big part is that they try to generate more revenue and enough to make it big enough. And for the solopreneurs, the individuals, coaches, which I'm part of that, I'm showing up as an investor for the last 30 years, a consultant for as many years, coaching businesses for 15 years, and I've started a mentoring program to be able to connect with leaders. So I like this space. I like the space that I can show up with different hats depending on the situation that it requires. And I think the best hat is a coaching hat because we can ask questions. And actually, I started to think about what is our role. And usually our role has been to ask a client questions so that they come up with the ideas, they come up with the actions. And I'm thinking differently now. I'm thinking that our role might be to ask the client questions and help them to come up with more questions. Now we're sacrificing time because if we ask a question, they give an answer, then we could take action and go. Well, what if that's the wrong action? And that's the point that we was making is what is the best way to come up with an idea? You come up with multiple ideas and then you evaluate which has the best chance of success. So, but that delays time. Exciting times that we're living in. It's very confusing, and you can witness that with the environment that we have out there. We're in the middle of, we're starting a recession or an inflation. All the technologies companies except Apple seems to be imploding. They're firing people, getting rid of. And the reason is that if they were doing well, they would keep the people. The thought was like Facebook hired 20 or 30,000 people during the pandemic. And they thought, oh, let's have a great idea, this metaverse or Meta. They changed their company name. Well, it didn't execute well. And the marketplace just imploded on that. So now they had to get rid of the people. But they're not alone. Meta, Facebook is doing that. Twitter, of course, has gone through a really shift with Elon Musk buying a company that's valued at $10 billion and he paid four or five times as much. Is like, that sounds very stupid, but maybe it's the crazy things that happen. So we don't know yet. That story is not over, but it just seems at the outset it's not quite right. Microsoft is losing money or market share. They lose the valuation. Why? I don't know, because they're a very good company. So all the technology companies are going through some sort of implosion or slowdown. And what they're finding is this, that they can get as much work done with the same amount of people. But that's different than innovation. Innovation, you need to have people thinking future-wise. Now, you can get the same amount of work to protect what their revenue stream is, but the innovation is not happening because the people they got rid of, or they don't have those people thinking in the right direction. So we're going through some interesting times in terms of how companies are showing up, how we could show up as individuals or providers of service and be able to do that. Here's a thought. And it's one of those thoughts that it's like, why isn't anybody thinking this? And so let me put it out there. The key here is for companies to focus on a particular revenue stream, product, service. And I came up with the acronym PAP, P-A-P. So they have a passion or some strong interest, and they put a lot of attention, meaning money or people or talent or effort into that, and practice. So they repeat over and over and over. Apple's a good example of that. They've come out with a great iPhone. They have not innovated greatly since the iPhone. The iPhone is the big beginning and the end, it seems, until something else is coming up. So maybe they're innovating. Well, actually, I know they're innovating. They just can't get it right. They come up with some mediocre products in the meantime. But the iPhone is their moneymaker. It continues to make money. They just iterate a little bit and they continue to do that. So they have a passion, interest, they have attention, they're putting people on it, and they're practicing, they're repeating that process over and over and again. So the key here is for us to look at that and say, that's interesting. How do we create the same amount of results in less time? Introduce the Pareto principle. 20% of the time will get you 80% of the results. What now, is that true? Is that possible? And Google's doing that. Google takes 20% of the time with employees to say, do whatever you want and produce as much. And they've done that. They produce 50% of the revenue comes from these people that took 20% to do that. What kind of crazy thing and magic is this? And so, okay, let's just go with that. So if a company says, okay, we'll produce what we're doing, and I think that's what going through, they're saying we're going to produce what we have with less people, with 20% of the people. Actually, they should be doing it with 20%, but the approach is wrong. They're saying we have 100% of the people with 100% of the time producing 100% of results. They're not taking the 20-80 rule. And if they did approach it like Google does and says, let's just go with this 20% of our time, and we can only, as human beings, be productive 20% of the time in the day. Let's go with that. And if that's the case, then have an environment for employees that they can focus, create, be productive 20% of the time that produces 100% of their work. And so now companies are saying, well, that doesn't seem right. We haven't done that before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, everybody came to work in the offices and they said, okay, we'll trade time for money. We'll give you money, you give us your time, produce. Now, if you're doing a manufacturing thing, widgets and cars, and you can produce by the hour. But in the creative environment with services, it's a little bit different environment. So that probably requires being able to focus 20% of the time. Now, what do you do with the other 80%? So the other 80% came out of recently yesterday's session, which we're talking about a lady that is focused on ADHD. And I thought, oh, people that have ADHD are not considered as equal as other people, productivity-wise, because they're scattered, they're not organized. So I thought, what if you take those people, and it could be any people, but I'm using that as an example because that's where this idea came from, is what if we take those people and get them to focus 20% of the time to produce 80%? And the other 80% is the other part, which is called NAP, N-A-P, the acronym I came up with. I came up with that so I can remember. And NAP is non-attention patterns, non-attention patterns. So you have a full focus with PAP, P-A-P, which is 20% for 80%. And the NAP, non-attention patterns, is you focus 80% to produce 20%. Now that doesn't seem right. It's like, why would you want to produce less? But you're still producing 20%. So combine the two, 20% with the focus and 20% with the non-attentive, that's 40% in one day, or at least assuming. So what does that mean? Well, what I think this means is, and I'd love to get your feedback. Follow me on this. You have a 20-80 rule and an 80-20 rule. The 20-80 rule gives you 20% because you can focus, you put your headset on, you have clarity about what you need, and you produce. And it's been known that creative people produce more in effect. But let's say that they can produce the 80%. The other time, the 80-20 rule is to be able to focus with non attentive patterns. And I'm thinking, first of all, you have the same person that doesn't have to pay attention. And where I got this idea is because Einstein, when he wanted to really get creative, he didn't go to his office. He went on a boat in Lake Geneva in Zurich, Switzerland, and he wasn't even a swimmer. He just went out, and when he came out with his big ideas, he thought, what would it be like to be able to travel through light? And I thought, this is non attentive patterns. You're looking for patterns. Where does this fit in? And I'm thinking that this might be the genesis of the idea when you're non attentive, when you're using NAP to do the focused work in the PAP so that you come up with the creative ideas when you're taking a shower, going sailing, going out, enjoying the environment. That 80% that produces maybe those ideas, that 20%, but you take that and the next day you come in and implement on that and come up and implement and iterate and be able to do that. I'm thinking this has some genesis of something. I'm not sure what I understand out of this, but I like this. This makes sense to me because all of a sudden now we're using 100% of our time and we're being creative to the point of 40%, twice as much, in an environment that's conducive for that. And I think a Western world versus a Middle East or repressive, the Southern countries, Latin America, Africa, they don't seem to allow an environment. Maybe Australia is an exception. Australia is more democratic. So you got to have an environment that allows freedom, creativity, and some tolerance for failure. You have to have an environment that says it's okay to fail and do better next time, or we encourage you. What do you need more? So there's some qualifications. And the other qualification that I find is this: autonomy. Autonomy. Now, an Einstein was able to do that because he had a certain level of autonomy, but he had a job. He worked at a patent office, and so when could he go on the lake and go rowing? Maybe on the weekend. So autonomy means that you have a level of financial independence, that you can be a thinker and dictate your own time, and you can control that. Now, you don't have to be your own boss. It helps probably, but certainly an organization that respects it and says, yes, we allow that because the results are going to be even more magnificent. And so that seems to be a real key to how we succeed. And I'm thinking that now we have some of the qualifications. So yes, all human beings could potentially, we got down to 20% of humans, and then we get down to probably a fraction of that. We're probably talking 4% of the population, and you have to be in the right environment. So all of a sudden, to be creative in this kind of situation at the maximum, there's some qualifications to do that. But nobody's thought about that, or at least they're trying to come out. Like the speaker said, people say, I want to make $5 million. How much money can we make? They come in asking that. And that's the wrong question. You haven't laid the groundwork. You have to lay out a process. You have to lay out the canvas. You have to be able to have multiple ideas. So that's what companies are asking. And that's what our clients are asking us. I'll pay you money. When do I get my gadget, my widget, my service? When do I get it? Right away. because that's how we're focused. Time. We want this right away. As a consumer, we go out and buy a car, we buy out a computer, we get our product right away. In a business, when you're developing something, well, they figure that's the same way. I pay product engineers to produce something, so produce it. And then you have a sales organization, which the speaker said, you give it to the sales, and now it's your problem. It's your problem, not my problem. And the salespeople say, well, this stuff doesn't work because the clients don't want this, and they send it back to product development. There's this bottleneck. Rather than working together, they're fighting each other. They're competing against each other, and nothing happens. This is a real life story because I'm working with a client that has that. They have a crappy product, and they have a great sales force. They invested in the sales force to train them how to sell, do ROI, return on investment selling, and it's a bad product. And they keep losing clients, and they go, we'll fix the product. And it's crazy. They're doing it the wrong way. They're not taught how to do it the right way, or they don't want to, or they have some constraints because they're fighting time. They're fighting losing money, all those kinds of things. So we have to be, I think, the shift changers, the guides, the right coaches, and help them step back. And with the help of the presenter and the tools and all those, think differently and be able to come up with something better. We, as consultants or coaches, we're not involved in that, but we have the least experience. And the people with the least experience can ask the questions. And or if somebody has what I call the point of execution, they're actually working in that area. They're probably the most knowledgeable at the lower level, working day in, day out. They know how to improve it, and they bubble up with the ideas. So the key there is that you make it inclusive and probably confidential, and all of a sudden that takes on a different dynamics where we're looking for the best ideas to put into place, and then we can rank on what the probabilities are at that.